I'm Linda Wood Small. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and at Pathways, I supervise an integrated group of social workers, spiritual care, bereavement, and volunteers. And then I'm also the bereavement supervisor for two of our offices, the one in Oakland and the one in San Francisco. Pathways does both home health and hospice. So we are not exclusively a hospice agency. We also do palliative care, which is part of home health, but really it's what's generally referred to as a bridge to hospice. It's a nonprofit, so there's not a lot of home health and hospice agencies that are nonprofits. It's getting fewer and fewer. The agency was started over 42 years ago by a woman, and well, really a couple of some hospital, Stanford Hospital, and the CEO is or was the woman who was the CEO for most of those years was a veteran. So we have a very strong veterans program. And the nonprofit arm allows us to have this very, very robust bereavement program that doesn't really exist in any other agency that I know of in this area. So we have a foundation and a foundation board who raises money to support this very robust bereavement program. And that bereavement program offers services to both Pathways patients or the family of Pathways patients who have passed on, and also any person in the community who's had a death. And they never have to have been connected to Pathways in any way. And we do all of that for no charge. Typical summer workshops. So we have a program that actually starts in June, goes all the way to this following August. So we ask for a longer commitment, generally from students. So that's something people need to know up front. We start around the middle of June. We onboard people. So there's a crossover between those who are leaving and those who are coming, because our clients are seen for 13 months. They can be seen for 13 months post the date of death. So we will be handing cases off from one cohort to the other as some are leaving and some are coming. So if you are the group that is on your way out, but still remaining for the summer, we ask that you offer some summer workshops. So we don't do groups during the summer, we do workshops. We do memorial services. We do a celebration of light, as well as afternoons of remembrance, which is in the spring. We do Path to the Holidays, seminar on how to get through the holidays. Those are all for the trainees to participate in and oftentimes lead. They offer phone support, so every person who has passed away, their family gets a bereavement call. They participate in what's called interdisciplinary group, which is when every 2 weeks the entire team comes to the table. Nurses, case managers, social workers, chaplains, and the bereavement trainees, depending on what team they're assigned to, and they go through all of the cases that are current and also the cases of those who've passed away. So they lead those IG groups for the bereavement portion. Then we also have our children's program called Heartful Memories, where we go into people's homes and we do pre-bereavement art projects with children who are going to experience a loss, and also do support groups. Sometimes the social worker or chaplain will for instance, contact me, or you even mentioned during IGG, this family needs support right now, even though the patient may have not passed yet. And so we do what's called pre-bereavement. So we would get or the patient has passed and the social worker will say, this family needs a call right now. So the nurses and social workers and chaplains generally do call the family after death. That's normal. But if they're extremely distressed, they'll ask the bereavement department to step in very quickly. Otherwise, they get a list of calls to make from the bereavement IDG, and they'll be calling on a routine basis. So every family might get a call 2 weeks after death or 4 weeks after death. And so they sort of have a running list of calls to make. And oftentimes from those calls, they get clients. The other way is people just simply call us, like people from the community or people maybe a couple of months after their person has passed will call Pathways and say, I need bereavement. And then either I will call Vivian or Tom, who also do bereavement, and we'll take a referral and then we'll pass it on to the trainee. That's usually how the referrals go. Caseload runs around either 8 clients and a group. So the group counts for 2 hours a week, or around 10 clients. Now, we will let people carry more than 10 in the sense that there's a rolling calculation. So if you have 10 clients, it's unlikely that all those 10 clients will come every week. There'll be cancellations and so forth. So you might have 1 or 2 more in your hours, or a compilation of hours, as well as your supervision. So it's generally though around 10 for actual direct practice. Then there's always, the IDG meetings, any kind of trainings, the notes, client advocacy, the research, that's on top of that. But that's just direct client hours. So we have 3 offices, Sunnyvale, Oakland, and San Francisco. Each office has their own group supervision for just that office. In the summertime, we oftentimes combine. Last summer, I combined East Bay and San Francisco because we had a smaller number of people. Some people had already left, other people had not come on yet. But generally, the offices are done individually, and we try not to have a group bigger than, let's say, 4 or 5 in the group supervision, so everybody gets a chance to talk about the clients. I have 4 in each group, and Tom has 5. He does the Sunnyvale office in his group. The individual supervision is done, now it's done on Zoom. Generally, it was done that you have to come into the office. So hopefully next year it will be different. So you will have to get in your car and drive to the actual site and be there in person for individuals and for group supervision. And it's generally, I try to do it all on the same day. It's not always possible. And every person gets group and individual every week. As I said before, we try to do the training starting in June. This last year we didn't because of Zoom. But basically you get 4 full days of training. Those trainings, everybody, if you come to Pathways, you're a volunteer. So there's no pay. And so you have to go through volunteer training, just like any volunteer. You're in the volunteer database. You have to have a medical, you have to have all your medical stuff done, get your forms done, get your TB test, all of that. We pay for it all, for everything. In the training, so you're going to go through 1 day of volunteer training. Normally our volunteers go through 2 full days of training, but we condense it down into 1. And that volunteer training really tells you a lot about our agency, which is the different programs we provide, how social work works, how spiritual care works, what our veteran program looks like, what we normally offer as far as patient support. and volunteer stuff, some of our policies, that type of thing. So you start with that. That's a one-day training. You learn how to log into the program that we use, which is called Better Impact. That's where you put your volunteer, your therapy hours into for us to get credit. And just all that technical stuff. You know, we work on getting your voicemail, email, that type of thing. Then we have a training on risk management. So we do CPS, APS, suicide, domestic violence. We do emergency management, safety, those types of things. We have a training on how to work with people in spiritual, with the different age groups throughout we do a training on family systems and working with children. And we do a whole thing on how to run groups and how to do bereavement telephone calls. Now, the children and family training isn't done till October, because we get people sort of up and running, going with their cases, and we do that. That's the 5th training. So we have 5 total trainings. We also require people to do some online classes just because of the agency that we're kind of managed by. So they have to do some online classes. Like they even have to do like oxygen safety, which I know seems silly, but there are some other classes you have to do. You have to log into a hub and you have to do. So there's quite a bit, but you can get credit for all of those hours as training hours. So if you have to do it because we require it, we let you log those and sign off on those hours. Question we ask people is, have you had a personal loss or have you ever experience with hospice? So that's, for us, that's number one. It does seem to make a difference if people have experience some kind of loss or trauma. It doesn't necessarily have to be loss, but we found that people that come in here who have not experienced any type of loss, it's pretty much of a stretch. The other thing is you have to be really well organized because you have to manage a lot of components. You know, getting your getting to IDG, getting through the bereavement plan of care for the patient. There's a lot of different aspects of what you're doing that aren't just like, okay, the patient comes to the clinic, I do my treatment plan, I got my notes, next one's scheduled at 11. There's a lot of components here at this agency. So people have to be very self-motivated. So we let people work very autonomously. There's not a lot of like breathing down your neck or hand holding. We'll support you if you need it, but we say, look, we expect you to operate like you would if you're in practice. This is the time for you to set yourself up and to be in charge of making sure that intake form is done and making sure that the consent is done and sending that out to the client and keeping your file. I'm not going to be like, looking at every single thing and saying, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. I mean, every once in a while we sort of go over what needs, the components you need to have completed at this time. But the encouragement here is for people to work in a very mature and self-directed way. So people need to feel like they have the ability to do that. They have to be really flexible. And then my little saying is you have to be able to guide and abide. So what I mean by that is you have to be willing to guide people and you have to be willing to just abide with where they are. So that's sort of, for me, the catchphrase for here is guide and abide. So you've got to be willing to speak up and you've got to be willing to give guidance, but you also have to be really comfortable with just sitting where people are, especially in a very painful grief place. So you've got to know yourself. You've got to know your capacity to sit with that kind of pain. And I think that is something you really just need to be honest about. before you try to come into this kind of work. It's a different with COVID. So this year, there's a lot of extra challenges. I'll talk about the normal challenges, but we understand that there's a lot of more challenges right now that we're all having with the whole Zoom and not being able to see each other. But the biggest challenge is working with the older adult population. So having interns or trainees come in who have never worked with the geriatric population. It's very much its own genre. It's very much about a different life view. There's all the political, social, cultural elements to that age group, as well as their own individual cultures and life experiences. You've got somebody who has a lot more life experience than you. You can agree or disagree with that. It's just the truth. You have someone who may not be as comfortable with a younger person telling them about their life or, directing them. You have to be willing to overcome that challenge and to really educate yourself about what life looks like for someone at that age. And I love, this has been a really good topic for this year. We've talked a lot about what it means to be an older adult, what kind of challenges that presents, what kind of challenges it presents to be married to somebody, to be sick yourself and married to a spouse who's got health issues as well. How does one person help another person when they're both infirmed? And the challenges of Medicare, the challenges of paying medical bills, of being on a fixed income. So it's a whole different world that you enter into, and you need to really want to do that. So I think that's the biggest obstacle that people face. It can be scary. It can feel like you're going into a different era. And it can feel sort of like, really, you're kidding? Different values. How am I careful about the fact that, I feel very liberated in this area, but my client is very, very uncomfortable with certain types of language, with ideas around certain types of lifestyles. You have to be very sensitive and willing to be sensitive with that. And I think that is the biggest challenge. We don't always get a lot of child clients. Now this year we do, but if you want to get your child hours, it could be sparse. So we don't get a lot of sometimes family counseling and child hours. Well, we get some, but we don't always get a lot. So that's another obstacle. And then just the simplicity of presence. People want to get in there and they just want to, I want to get in there and just really muck around and really see a change come in this person's life. And you have to be very comfortable with just sitting in simple presence with people and just being a witness to what they're going through. And that can be quite difficult. You might do 10, this is a long-term counseling. Again, you also have to want to see somebody for a year. This is something where you might sit and they might be weeping for the first 12 sessions and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. So you have to be comfortable with just the simple practice with people. And we don't do treatment plans. We talk about treatment plans. We have goals and we have structure, but we're not a traditional, I'm going to write up a 5-step treatment plan and I'm going to diagnose. We avoid diagnosing a lot of times because we're talking about grief, but we also end up going into childhood trauma. We go into domestic violence. Oftentimes we have patients that somebody committed suicide, they were murdered, they were tragically killed in a drunk driving accident. I mean, we have some really, really hard cases. We have, everything that you can imagine, but we're not a mental health clinic. We are a grief counseling program. And we are coming from that place. And we're not here to tell people, I think you're bipolar. I mean, we might do that. We will refer people out and help. We've gotten some people on medication and it's helped a lot, but that's not our focus. So people need to realize that they're doing something that's very soulful, that's very connected based, a lot of trust, building a lot of rapport, and uh, it can be challenging if you don't feel like you have the emotional bandwidth to, and it's also a very spiritual work. If you don't have the bandwidth for that kind of work, then you probably shouldn't come here. So the breadth of experience at Pathways is very attractive. So you can talk to other people who've come here, but the truth is, as I just mentioned, the variety of clients and cases and the things that are uncovered is pretty broad. You really get the full scope, and you never know what's going to happen at any session. So it's always a surprise. You're sitting on the edge of your seat. The candidacy for here is very competitive. We always have way, way, way more candidates than we can possibly take. So, it is a competitive process. If people want to come here, they need to not, don't sit on it. Once the opportunity comes and you can bring forth your resume or whatever, get an interview. You need to do it if this is what you want to do, because it's just always been that way, because we have such an intact program. We do a variety of treatment options. So we do we look at all the different ways that people can be treated, and we throw it all out there. So you're going to get exposed, whether you choose to use different treatment options or not. You're going to get exposed to a lot of different things, whether it's body work, parts work, visualization, CBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, family systems. We're going to talk about it. So you're going to probably dip your toe in a lot of different things, but you might not spend a concentrated amount of time in any of them. So if you have a specialty and you want to go in that direction, then get a placement that has that specialty. Advantage here is you get to try out a lot of different things and see what works for you. And I think that's really the gift. And you have supervisors here who have tons of years of experience, who've been in the field for 30 years or whatever. Maybe not even just with therapy, but in field work in all different kinds of backgrounds. So I think there's a lot of depth that you can gain from being in a placement like this.